his own journey and his own development, and what he's doing for the Qawwali tradition. And what I wanted to do should I just say a few remarks right now?
Yes, that would be fine. Please just
What I
go for
wanted
it.
to do was to focus my remarks today on Amir Khusro, who we are going to be talking about in greater detail today. So and I think to contextualize Amir Khusro and what he stood for, and I think over the centuries has remained as an icon, uh, is when you look at South Asia in the contemporary period, the periods of colonialism and then nationalism, and then even what's going on in India today, what's going on in Pakistan today, and so on, we find societies are becoming highly polarized and fragmented on the basis of religion and caste and ethnicity and race and so on and so forth. And as we're well aware, this is not just a phenomena that is limited to South Asia. We're seeing it across the world, including here in the United States. And it's one of the paradoxes of our times that while on the one hand, people of very different races, communities, ethnicities, race, are all coming together in a way, that's unprecedented in human history. This closer contact with people who are very different than yourselves, and this contact takes place in many different forms and shapes, including the internet. But this closer contact has not led to better understanding between peoples, primarily because uh, uh, they don't have the tools to understand and engage with difference. And that not having the tools to engage and understand difference, it's created a kind of what I call a religious and cultural illiteracy. And that cultural and religious literacy is a very, very dangerous phenomena because it stereotypes people, it dehumanizes people, it tears the social fabric of society apart, where entire groups are dehumanized and so on and so forth. So, um, uh, so when I think about the figure of Amir Khusro, who of course was, um, you know, um, a historian, poet, mystic, musician, died in 1326. Um, he today, I mean, when I think about what he did in his time and what his work, which has survived over the centuries, uh, and the traditions he started, uh, he would certainly rank, I would say, in the context of South Asia, amongst the most prominent builders of bridges across difference. Um, he is widely recognized as the founder of uh, a composite culture that draws on both what today we see as a Muslim and Hindu heritage, but whose roots go back to the 12th century. Khusro lived at a time when several dynasties of Central Asian or Turkic origin had established kingdoms in the northern regions of the subcontinent. They used Persian as a language of administration and culture. And in that sense, South Asia was really part of a Persianate world, which connected the regions and peoples stretching from Bengal all the way to Turkey. So if you look at it, the elites in this huge geographic territory were all, even though they may have been of Turkic origin, they were all Persian speakers, and they participated in what I call Persianate culture, and that included sharing poetry, but also architecture and music and so on. So Amir Khusro was the son of a Turkic father, a father who came of Central Asian Turkic origin, and an Indian mother. And in this sense, he straddled and actively engaged with these different worlds. Um, as an early cosmopolitan, through his Persian poetry, he identified on the one hand with this larger Persian literary world that stretched way beyond South Asia, into Central Asia, and in fact even into the Ottoman realms, while through his Hindu compositions, or what those are attributed to him, he showed his affiliation to this Indic world, the South Asian world, um, famously called the Tutiya Hind, the parrot of Hind of India, on account of his eloquence. He synthesized really the multiple strands of his identity. And the genius of his synthesis um, is, is evident uh, through these various cross pollinations in language and in poetry that are attributed to him. Um, he is, for example, credited with composing bilingual poetry, in which one verse was in Persian and the other was in Hindi. His creditor invented a sitar against doing sort of musical innovation, Central Asian instrumentation with South Asian instrumentation. And then most importantly, the qawwali. And if you look at the qawwali itself, the way it is even practiced today, it is a text that is um, multilingual in the sense that qawwali performances usually can have languages, multiple languages, and they can have Arabic and Persian and Urdu and Hindi, and sometimes there's Braj. So they are multilingual, partly in the way that the audiences are multilingual and you want to address people in various different ways, because the idea of the qawwali is to connect with your audience and connect not just intellectually, but also emotionally, and I would say aesthetically with your audience. But this multilingualness also goes into the kinds of symbols and things that are used. So he draws freely from symbols and metaphors from the Persian traditions, from local South Asian traditions, including traditions of bhakti, devotionalism to Krishna, and so on and so forth, and Islamic ones. So it is this gifted genius. Um, this gifted genius is best remembered today at a popular level through the many songs and compositions attributed to him, which actually are a very powerful way in which they bring people together. In fact, Jawaharlal Nehru remarks in his book, Discovery of India, I do not know if there is any other instance anywhere of songs written 600 years ago maintaining their popularity and mass appeal in being still sung without any change of words, unquote. Now, Amir Khusro, as most of you know, was a devoted disciple of the renowned Sufi master, Sheikh Nizamuddin Aulia. And he was so strongly attached to his guide, his mentor, that when Hazrat Nizamuddin died in 1325, Amir Khusro was completely heartbroken. I mean, his whole world fell apart. And a few months later, Amir Khusro himself died, and he's fittingly buried next to the tomb of his beloved teacher in Delhi. And it is believed that Amir Khusro was inspired to write this very famous, what's become a very famous qawwali, Aaj Rang Hai, after he met Nizamuddin Aulia for the first time. It was a meeting that completely transformed him. He returned home in a state of ecstasy and told his mother um, that the world has a glow of divine radiance because he has met a person um, he had always been searching for. You know, he asserted that there was no one like Nizamuddin Aulia in this entire world, and he was the only one who could enlighten him. And this Qawwali, expressing Amir Khusro's yearning for his peer or his spiritual master, is still recited today in Delhi at the shrine. And I'm going to maybe at this point maybe turn it over to Bilal and see if he wants to add anything to this, and maybe he wants to talk about this Qawwali or anything else he wants to talk about Amir Khusro, and then we can go on further.
Um, Greetings to you all. Adab and salams to Janab Professor Ali Asani Saab and all Aisha ji and Asif Dhar ji, the Reed Society, all are wonderful participants, many dear old friends, many whom I have met for the first time. Um, yes, it's such a blessing to have Professor Saab with us, and you have seen such a long period of the development and the evolution of this particular subject of Indo-Persian studies, especially Hazrat Amir Khusro. So thank you very much for your amazing contributions and your remarks today. And of course, this kalam, Aaj Rang Hai Ma Rang Hai, oh mother, it is a day of color. Um, I think that the Persian culture too, just like the Indian culture, has a lot of celebration of especially around Nowruz and the spring. We see that there's a celebration with color, and so many of these powdered dyes, vegetable dyes, and flower dyes made of flowers, which have names like Abir and Gulal. Are very common across this whole region, and I used to celebrate everything from Holi to Basant to Nowruz, and using that amazing analogy, Hazrat Amir Khusro says, "I have been dyed in the colors of my beloved Peer," and I think that he was very young, in fact, if I'm not mistaken, when he first met Khwaja Saab, and he, I think, another kalam which we'll come to later, perhaps Chap Tilak, was also written in the same vein, but it would be. We would be remiss if we don't hum this melody for our listeners. So I'm going to hum a small snatch of it, and then I will hand it back to you, sir.
Yeah, thank you.
So just to that, a lot of these, um, for example, this particular composition. This is in a variation of raga, or as I spoke about makams and ragas last time, and I will be speaking more about them, called Khammaj. And Khammaj is a very interesting raga. It is known as a That raga or a parent raga, which gave birth to many other modes and melodies. And so a lot of these ragas, such as which came out of Khammaj, are used in Qawwalis. And this is because basically Khammaj is a folk melody. And a lot of other forms of music, such as Thumri, they are also based in large part on this raga. So this is in a kind of a Mishra Khammaj. It plays around with this particular note structure. And the beat is 8 beats, or known as Keherwa. So I'm going to sing a little bit of this for you. I have a set of tanpuras which I wanna play here. If they get too loud, please stop me. रैनी चढ़ी रसूल की रैनी चढ़ी रसूल की सो रंग मौला के हाथ, जिसकी चूनर रंग दियो, जिसकी चूनर रंग दियो, सो धन धन के भाग। आज रंग है रीमा, रंग है री, आज रंग है रीमा, रंग है री, आज रंग है रीमा, रंग है री, आज रंग है। माटी के तुम दीवरे जो सुनियो हमरी बात, आज मिलावरा पिया संग तुम जगियो सारी रात। आज रंग है री माँ, रंग है री, आज रंग। हरियरी मेरे, हरियरी मेरे महबूब के घर, रंग है री, आज रंग है री माँ, रंग है री, आज रंग है। आज सजन मिलावरा मोरे आंगन माँ, सजन मिलावरा मोरे आंगन माँ, सजन मिलावरा मोरे आंगन माँ। आज रंग है री माँ, रंग है री, मोहे पीर पायो निजा मोदी दियाली जा, मोहे पीर पायो निजा मोदी नियाली जा, मोहे पीर पाया। आहे 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 वा मोहे पीर पाया, निजामुद्दीन आलिया मोहे पीर पाया, निजामुद्दीन आलिया। वो तो जब देखूं मोरे संग है री माँ, रंग है री, आज रंग है री माँ, रंग है री, आज रंग है, हाँ आज रंग है माँ, आज रंग है री।
Wow, mashallah, kya baat hai. It's just, just wonderful to hear you, Bilal Saab. I mean, and this, the voice and your rendition of it is so moving. And I think that's something that I think is not just, the a characteristic of the Qawwali, but I think many of the Sufiana Kalam and the poetry, but I think also it goes into other devotional traditions in South Asia, whether we are talking about the bhajan or the kirtan or, things that are sung by the sons. There's this fusion of knowledge. There's what I call the knowledge for the mind, that's discursive, and then knowledge for the heart, and which is emotional. And I think these genres are so powerful because they fuse the aesthetic and the ethical and the moral and the spiritual together, so that they are appealing to both the heart and the mind. And that's so and that's what I think it's very interesting that we have here an example of what is an experience of knowledge making that is sensory, and that connecting with this is very important. I wanted to, so it's very interesting in this. I want to say a little bit about the symbolism of color that he uses in this composition, because one of the lines, that's in some of the renditions of this is that, we are now of one color, and I become you, and you've become me. I'm your body, and you're my soul. And this business of the color, that and the self, in giving up of oneself and being colored by somebody else, in this case, his Sufi peer, actually is a very interesting allusion to a Quranic verse which says, color yourself with the color of God. There can be no better color than the color of God. And so this idea is that we have to go from being self-centric and egocentric to being God-centric. And then when you're totally focused on God, the transcendent, we become colored with the color of God. And in a certain way, it's the same idea of this color, being focused on giving yourself up to, submitting, not just in the sense of submitting, but committing yourself to a cause. And so when I was hearing you sing this, I thought already of that connotation, that nuance that I thought I would share with you, in terms of this particular piece. I don't know if you want to say anything. I'd leave it at.
खुसरो रैन सुहाग की मैं
Yeah.
जागी के संग तन मोरा मन पीहू का जो दोनों एक ही रंग. And of course what he says about there is another rang. All these, there are so many interpretations. The late Ustad Iqbal Khan Sahab taught me this particular composition. मोहे अपने ही रंग में रंग देनी जामो है अपने ही रंग में. Color me in your colors.
Mhm.
जो तू मांगे रंग की रंगाई, जो तू मांगे रंग की रंगाई, मोरा जो बन गिरवी रख ले सैया, तू तो साहिब मोरा महबूबे इलाही मोहे अपने ही. So the whole notion is Mehboob Ilahi, the laqab which Hazrat Ghausul Azam also had. Mehboob Ilahi, Mehboob Khuda, Mehboob Subhani. So the one who's the beloved, for whom the Quran Sharif says, Allah inna awliya Allahi la khawfun alayhim wa lahum yahzanun. Those who are friends, the friends of God, the awliya Allah, they know no fear and they cannot be oppressed. And so I think that when you were talking about nisbat, that how Khusro feels that now he has this nisbat, and it is or this relationship, this felt connection, and it is due to this connection that he too will experience this closeness with, and be colored in those colors of. It's a very powerful concept, and it's become totally Indic. It's a
Yeah.
bit like, as you know, when speaking of color, when Hazrat Khwaja sang Kheliye Dhamal,
Mhm.
come let's play Holi, or come let's play colors, or let's play the colors of spring with. So in that, a very less rendered stanza is Arab Yar Tora Basant Manave, Rakhiyo Jagat mein Lal Gulal. And who is this Arab Yar? This is, of course, the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. So I think that the Bais Khwaja Milban Ban Aaye Taam mein Hazrat Rasool Sahibul Jamal. So this the way I mean, these days we render a lot of the supplications are in Arabic, But what is so interesting is that, as you know much better, that in earlier periods, they were far more fluid between Farsi, Arabi, probably even Hindvi. These ways of expressing devotion in the Indic tradition were far more natural and organic than they are now. So the richness has somewhat become a little, I suppose, kind of more compartmentalized into, but I think that this Fanafil Pir, Fanafil Rasul, Fanafil Allah comes through very beautifully, beholden to the Guru, beholden to the messenger, and beholden to God. This whole chain of devotion, which Hazrat Amir Khusro also talks about, I think that, and the way he has done it in talking about the colors, talking about the very similar to the kirtans and bhajans and the Vaishnava Bhakti, the Madhura Bhakti, and I think that that is amazing, and that is something which is really, I think, a glue that holds the subcontinent together still, perhaps in many ways.
Yeah, I agree with you, because I think the composition of the Qawwali, the symbols that I use, the metaphors, the allegories that I use are multivalent and polyvalent. So it's really assuming that that the audience is going to be cosmopolitan, that it's going to come from very many different backgrounds. And the Qawwali is an ideal composition because it's really appealing to people from different backgrounds. So talk about a genre that is engaging with diversity, in its very structure, in its symbols, its metaphors. That's why I'd like to talk about, the Qawwali as part of, engagement with pluralism. It's a modern concept that we talk about, but I think if we go back to look at the roots of this and how it has been in a certain way, it's a very powerful way of bringing people together, but also engaging with diversity, and in that way becoming an instrument of creating harmony. People who may, so in a certain way, when you enter the dargah and you participate in the Qawwali, all the ideological forms of religion are left aside, and you enter a different world where all those labels just drop, and you experience. I think the other thing that I wanted to sort of pick up here, because you talk about Mehboob-e Ilahi and the beloved of God and so on, is the very strong emphasis on love that you find in all this poetry. Love and its impact, and what a transformative force it is in people's lives. And here I wanted to just mention, an idea or concept, that lies central, I think, to the Qawwali tradition, but also traditions of mysticism in South Asia, particularly Sufi mysticism, but you find it in other traditions as well, is this idea of love as a force, as a cosmic force that connects everybody and everything. And this idea is, of course, this idea of love as a cosmic force actually emanates again from an interesting Quranic verse where it is said that what's referred to as the Misake-Ishq, the covenant of love. And this is an interpretation that is given to Quran, I think verse 7, 171, Alastu bi Rabbikum, where God is before creation, so in primordial times, there's this utterance, Alastu bi Rabbikum, am I not your Lord? And the response in the Quran is, and the uncreated creation comes into being saying, Bala Shahidna, yes, we witnessed it. So in a certain way, this creation comes into being out of a response to this call, Alastu bi Rabbikum. And this, for, in Islamic mystical thought, this was a moment of pure perfection, because everything that comes into existence is united with each other and with the divine through love. So that's why this is called this covenant of love. And it's returning to this state of union with the beloved, being one with God, that all the souls that have been separated through the process of creation, that have forgotten this covenant of love. They've forgotten how they're connected with God, but how they're also how they're connected with all souls, all creatures. They've forgotten this covenant, and this idea of through the music, through the kawali, it's bringing them into a sense of remembrance. Remember this covenant. Remember. So that's the idea where zikr comes in. That, and there's this idea of separation and forgetfulness and zikr, remembrance. So remember reality. Remember who you really are. These physical forms are temporal. They pass. What's your reality? The soul, what's the real? And connect with the real. And remember the real. Because everything else that is in the temporary, in the physical world is transient and disappears. So this idea of this primordial covenant as being a reality that you have to connect with. And I think it's also very important, we think about you say about people who are out of touch with reality are crazy. How can you be out of touch with the real? And if you're constantly in touch with the fake, the temporary, you're not solidly based on something. So I think this is an important concept. But I would also say that this concept that he has about divine love, um, he has a very interesting composition on how he imagines this covenant of love. And he has this composition that's in Persian, Namidanam Chimanzil Bud. Um, uh, that he's like, I don't know where I was last night. All around me was this dance of ecstasy, Rakse Bismil. That's how he starts this piece. And this is an allusion to, last night is an allusion to the primordial covenant, the past. That he's imagining that what was this like, and he imagines this as an event that everyone was dancing in joy, kind of being a sama. Everyone was ecstatic. And it's a fascinating, composition, that line. And then the ultimate sort of, one of the most beautiful lines in there is that he imagines that this is an assembly where God himself, Khuda, Khud Mire Majlis, that God himself is presiding over this ecstatic assembly. And that the Prophet Muhammad, Muhammad Shama may feel that the Prophet Muhammad is in fact the candle of this assembly, the light of this assembly. And this mention of the light of the candle of this assembly is, of course, in one sense, an allusion to the prophetic light. But also in another sense, when you had these poetic assemblies, these mushairas as we call them now, usually the poet who was performing, there would be a candle placed in front of them to show that this was their turn to perform. And the fact that there's this image there of the prophet, performing in his delight. So think about this as a primordial, this the cosmic event that God is presiding over. Everyone is in joy, in ecstasy, and there's the prophet, the prophetic light that is also there over this assembly. So it's such, it's such a moving poem, the way Amir Khusro has described this event. And it shows, his creativity and his imagination, that he could come up with such a beautiful composition. So Bilal Saab, maybe I've talked enough, maybe I'll turn it over to you. Yeah.
Professor Saab, we're all getting goosebumps, and in just thinking about this primordial. We were talking about this with Sidi Asif Dhar also, that what is the unstruck sound, the primordial sound, from which everything emanates, and Hazrat Amir Khusro is going back to that sound, and it reminds me of a poem which I translated, which is anonymous. Dani samache bud, Dani samache bud, saute bala shunidan, saute bala shunidan, az khweshetan buridan, ba wasle haq rasidan. That do you know what sama is? It is the hearing of the sound. Yes, bala. It is being cut off from oneself and reaching union with the beloved. So through sama, of course, the Chishtis say that, the Chishti Sufis say that if we don't listen to sama for 3 days, we will achieve a state of spiritual deadness. So for them, it is a zikr, fikr, and sama. And of course, Hazrat Amir Khusro also talks about the third space of love. He's, when he says, Khao fire ishkam Musalmani mara darkar neest. So that I am a follower of the creed of love. Echoing maybe Maulana Jalaluddin Rumi, who says, Chitadbire Musalmana wa man khudra namidanam. I don't know who I am. I don't know whether I'm from Adam or Eve, or from the ether, or from Bulgaria or China or India, but I feel that I am from the eternal root of love, and from and so it is this very state which Hazrat Amir Khusro wants to invoke through this beautiful kalam, and so I would be very happy to today some of the Kawals would categorize this as a Nate Arifana, as they like to call it. But I think it's a plain and out, as you said, depiction of Hazrat Amir Khusro's idea of reaching that anahat nad, the saute bala, And so I'm going to try and do justice to it, although what you have described is, so amazing. But I'm going to try and do justice to Namida Namche Manzil. So here come on my Tanpuras. So this is just to tell you that this is a composition in Rag Khamaji Bhatyar. So the thing is that with classical music, it's not all classical music didn't come from sort of a notation system, at least in India. These are all various streams. The whole analogy of the Majma'ul Bahrain can apply to this too. That there are so many small rivulets which are feeding into the great river that is Shastriya Sangeet or Khayal Gaiki, and so. There are several. Khamaj, once again, is a very big ocean, right? And within Khamaj, there are so many little islands and shores, which are other ragas. For example, Jinjhoti and Khambavati and Gavati and Sindhura, and it has so many different ways, different interpretations. But one that has one that incorporates so many of them is this very lovely but completely rare raga of the Delhi Gharana known as Khammaji Bhatyar. Now, it doesn't have much to do with the original Bhatyar. There's a very famous composition by Nusrat Fateh Ali Khan Sahab, which I will give you a link to in one of the later sessions when we do music from Punjab. So this is invoking Baba Farid, Allah Muhammad Shahriyar Haji Khwaja Qutb Farid. So this one he has done in Rag Bhatyar. Now that is pure Bhatyar, but this is Khammaji Bhatyar. So this has a lot of, for those who understand raga, this has a lot of shadows or chaya of different ragas, as I said, like Khambhavati and Jinjhoti, which is one of my favorite ragas. So this composition is of Ustad Nusrat Ali Khan Saab, and it was created or composed by his father, Ustad Fateh Ali Khan Saab, and his uncle Ustad Mubarak Ali. So I'm just going to sing a little bit, and then we'll have Professor Saab please explain this in more detail to us, of course. So we begin with the one couplet of Hazrat Bu Ali Shah Qalandar. I know not where I'm going, Nami Danam Gujar Aftam. Hazrat Khusro says, I know not where I was last night. Ghubare kuwe ubudam asire buwe ubudam gulame ruwe ubudam namidanam kujaraftam Namidanam che manzil Bud shab jaye ke man budam Namidanam che manzil Bud shab jaye ke man budam Namidanam che Namidanam che manzil Bud shab jaye ke man budam Namidanam che manzil Bud shab jaye ke man budam Bahar सूरक से बिस्मिल Bahar सूरक से बिस्मिल बोध शब जाए के मन बूदम Bahar सूरक से बिस्मिल बोध शब जाए. Now this style of singing is an old style of singing. If somebody tried to tackle it today, they try and make it very, very over melodic, like Bollywood singing today, you know, like Bahar Surak se Bismil, Bahar Surak se Bismil, and then put a few chords there and ruin everything. But the whole idea is that this is the Purzor, the bold singing of the Punjab Ang, the Delhi Ang. Bahar Surak se Bismil, Bud shab jaye ke man budam Bahar Surat se. Now we come to Bol Baat and Takrar, which is a part of this, where you create a loop, Girabandi, and add qita, couplets, different couplets, improvisations. One thing from Maulana Rumi. जुदा मबाश के ई रस में आशनाई नस्त जुदा मबाश के ई रस में आशनाई नस्त बया बया के मारा ताकत जुदाई नस्त नमीदा नमचे चे मंजिल नमीदा नमचे चे मंजिल which place नमीदा नमचे चे मंजिल नमीदानम चे. Here अल्लामा इकबाल. किसी से मेरी मंजिल का पता पाया नहीं जाता किसी से मेरी मंजिल का पता पाया नहीं जाता जहां मैं हूँ फरिश्तों से वहां जाया नहीं जाता नमीदानम चे चे मंजिल नमीदानम. One couplet from the guru of Khwaja Moinuddin Chishti Rahmatullah Alayh. Namida nam ke aakhir chu dame deedar miraksam. I know not why, when I see the visage of the beloved, I break into a dance. But I am proud of the fact that I dance only and only for the beloved. Namidanam ke aakhir chu dame deedar miraksam. Magar nazam bhai zoke ke peshe yaar miraksam. Namidanam nam che manzil. Namidanam che manzil bood shabja. Eke man boodam bahar surak se bismil bood shabja. Eke man boodam pari pe kar nigare sarva kade lala rukh sare pari pe kar. Gama pada ni da pada ma ba gama pa ma ga sare pa ma ga sare ni da pa sa pada sare ga sare pa ma ga da sare ma pa da sare ga ta ni da pa sa ni da pa da ma pa ga ma re ga sa pari pe kar nigare sarva kade lala rukh sare sarapa sarapa afate dil sarapa afate dil bood shab jaye ke man boodam sarapa afate dil bood shab jaye ke rakiba gosh bar awaaz u darna ze man tarsa rakiba gosh bar आवाज़े उदर नाज़े मन तरसा सुखन गुफ्तन चे मुश्किल बूद शब जाए के मन बूदम. And the Makhta says, खुदा खुद मीरे मजलिस बूदो अंदर लामका खुसरो खुदा खुद मीरे मजलिस बूद अंदर लामका खुसरो खुदा खुद मीरे मजलिस बूद अंदर. खुदा खुद मीरे मजलिस बूद अंदर लामका खुसरो मोहम्मद मोहम्मद शम्मे महफिल मोहम्मद शम्मे महफिल बूद शब जाए के मन बूदम मोहम्मद शम्मे महफिल. Now notice when the sum or when the beat number 1 1 2 3 4 5 6 7 8 1 dhage nati naka din dhage na in the beat of the tabla. So every time the Namidanam che manzil bood shab jaye ke man boodam. Now boodam has nothing to do with the word dam in one sense, but dam means life. So this is the way the Qawwal creates this whole repetition, which creates this asr. The asrar is created through the bahar surak se. Dam means literally life force or breath. Bahar su मोहम्मद शम्मे महफिल बूद शब जाए के मन बूदम ओ शब जाए के मन बूदम ओ शब जाए के मन बूदम.
Yeah. Mashallah, it's just beautiful. And I think what I was amazed at is actually the repertoire of poetry that you have at your command. I mean, this is, one of the, the great things about Qawwali, especially when you get a knowledgeable performer who has, a whole treasure house of poetry, and you could see the associations he started making, like with Namidanam, and then he went into all these other poets who all had lines with Namidanam, and he brought them all into the Qawwali, and then he came back to the original Qawwali, and this kind of um, intertextuality, going into different traditions, uh, is uh, is a real art form. And what it actually tells us, in a certain way, the fact that you're able to quote all these poets who may physically, they're in different historical periods, but through the Qawwali, they all become alive. They're all in conversation with each other. So this is what, you brought Amir Khusro into conversation with Muhammad Iqbal, right? So in a certain way, what you're saying is that time and space, physical, you're transcending time and space, and these poets are alive through their lines, and it's as if Amir Khusro is having a conversation with Muhammad Iqbal, or any other poets that you bring in, and that's again a very interesting way in which uh, the Qawwalis uh, mm, respond, I think, to divisions of time and divisions of space, that it helps you transcend those and overcome those. And of course, in that last line that you mentioned, that Khuda mere majlis would dar la makan. La makan is the state where there's no time, there's no space. So it's locating this assembly itself into this la makan, and then
Wow.
you yourself through your poetry are saying, well, there really is la makan. We can go back and forth between different traditions and so on. um, I did see in some of the chat there were a lot of discussions going about this Rakse Bismil,
Uh,
and I just wanted to say a few words about that, because it's such a fantastic image. So Raqs, as you know, is the dance, and Bismil is of course coming from the word Bismillah, in the name of God, the Raqs Bismil. And the origin of this image actually uh, comes from this. Um, connecting with, when you slaughter a chicken or slaughter an animal, halal, you should say Bismillah. And then, you know, and then the creature is just sort of dancing around headless. So that's where the poets picked that up. But to mean that once you have sacrificed yourself for the beloved, once you've given up your ego for the beloved, you are in this ecstatic dance. And so you have to interpret it not literally, but I think the symbolic meaning is that once you've given yourself up to the beloved, uh, the way you respond is through this ecstasy, the ecstasy, and this ecstasy is brought about through this love, because you're experiencing this love that cannot be described, but you're experiencing it through this form of dance. And it could also, it reminds you of during the sama, people get into a set of wajd. You can do it even in a Qawwali as well, where people get transformed into a state of wajd. Wajd literally is being translated as ecstasy, but its root meaning is from wajada, to find, to connect. So it's people who have found the connection. And the way they find that spiritual connection sometimes gets manifest to these physical actions where they're totally out of control. Um, anyway, so this particular Rakse Bismil, brings in a whole different set of nuances into what's going on. And of course, this beautiful event where there are beautiful people who are structured like Cyprus, and they are, with they are also being connected with tulip, you know, uh, chiefs, So just, you know, fairy-like creatures of extreme beauty are all dancing, and you're all ecstatic in this wonderful event. So, and how long do we have? Just curious about.
About 30 minutes, I think. No? Yeah, 30 minutes.
30 minutes? Okay. So maybe I'll introduce another sort of idea that I think that Bilal Saab mentioned, another of Amir Khusro's verses, Kafir-e Ishkam, Musulmani Mara Darkar Neest, that I'm an infidel of love. And this creed, being Muslim or Hindu, and also I have no need for this creed. And Har Rageman Tare Gashta, that every vein of my body has become a string. And this Zunar, that it's supposed to be, the string, the sacred thread that the Brahmins wear. He's compared that my whole body has become, as every vein in my body has become a thread. So I don't even need the thread of a Brahmin. Like I've transcended identity. So this trope, I want, maybe say a little about. It's relatively this kafire ishkam or kafire ishq, the infidel of love. It's a trope that is very common in Persian and also in Urdu poetry. And in my interpretation, it refers to a person who is critical of legalistic and ritualistic conceptualizations of religion as promoted by conventional scholars and religious authorities and so on, who take religion as a marker of identity and difference. For Khusro, these expressions are narrow and leave very insufficient space for the very essence of the human-divine relationship, love. And so by relate to God through passionate, yearning, longing, love, people can become so transformed that they're purified of all these egotistical tendencies and become God-centric. So in this verse, Amir Khusro claims that he has been so transformed by the love of God that he has become emaciated. He's become so thin, emaciated, in a manner reminiscent of the legendary Majnun, the Arabian lover Majnun, who was pining for his beloved Layla. And alluding to this sacred thread that Brahmins wear across their torsos, he declares that his passionate love of God has so altered him, both internally and externally, that every vein resembles this thread, which in a way it's the thread of infidelity, because those who construct religion on basis of orthodoxy and identity and so on see the thread of the Brahmin as the thread of the infidel. But he's saying, no, this is in fact the thread of love. And it connects us. So in other words, that love is such a transformative force that it transcends the socially constructed categories, such as Muslim and Hindu, which no longer have, any significance at this stage. So in challenging these conventional formulations, Amir Khusro comes to celebrate, in fact, the label infidel. In the sense, the term infidel of love, in his eyes, serves as the badge of true faith, one that challenges the narrow construction of religion as a static socio-political identity. It's challenging all this way. So it shows that concepts like fidelity, orthodoxy are contingent on, socio-political circumstances, and they reflect ideological perspectives. But the spiritual truth is far removed from these categorizations. So he plays with this image, and so do other poets. So again, it's a genius the way in which he's able to bring this imagery into the context of South Asia and connecting it with the sacred thread that the Brahmins wear, and really say, basically, we all come from one soul. we all originate in one soul, which is again a very powerful idea that he's trying to convey. So Bilal Saab, I'll hand it over to you.
Ji Hazrat, mashallah, it's such a amazing, it's just so mesmerizing the way you explain things. Thank you. There's so much, कितनी सारी बातें छुपी होती हैं बातों में बातें और परतें, layers and layers. As Maulana Rumi says that Aql Ahmad Dino Dunya Shod Kharab, Ishq Ahmad Har Du Alam Kamyab. And that, when the brain becomes sort of havi or interferes, and then both this world and the next world are kind of ruined, and when love becomes apparent, then everything becomes completely successful. And I feel that this whole trope, this idea of ishq, is in fact coming in from this Indo-Persian tradition, and it's still very strongly apparent even today. I mean, we have Seema Akbarabadi talking about not mandir and masjid but mohabbat. Mohabbat karne walon ki mohabbat hi haqiqat hai. किसी को याद करके आह भर लेना इबादत है. And then we see people are talking about namaz ishq, or or तुम अहले मोहब्बत हो मोहब्बत मांगो, or in Punjabi that every ईमान सलामत हर कोई मंगदा इश्क सलामत कोई हो मंगण ईमान शर्मावण इश्कों ते दिल विच गैरत आई हो. और असां इश्क नमाज जदों नीती है सानू भुल गए मंदिर मसीती है. So this idea is going back to this amazing waqia, which is also described in Chahl Ruza, which has become one of my favorite texts, although there are scholars who say that maybe it's authentic, maybe it's not. But this whole story about har qaum rast rahe deene wa qibla gahe, which I hopefully you will throw a little light on, because I think this whole fight between Turk and Hindu, as is going on at a political level, which talks about kufr and Islam, or which talks about from the other perspective, which talks about Malicha, and which talks about the Vija. So I would say that in the middle of this debate, someone like a Rahim, who comes in much later, of course, or an Amir Khusro, who says har qaum rast rahe dine wa qibla gahe, and in response to his peer he says man qibla rast kardam barsimt kaj kulahe. So he's also answering that if not the temple and if not the mosque, if love, then where? So he says, look, you are my qibla, you are the direction in which I point to. So I think that this is a very powerful concept, and it is not negating God or religion. It is not negating. It is not talking about. It is just, as you pointed out, it refuses to involve itself in legality and semantics, and it wants to experience God through love, and as a that God first, as Waris Shah says, God first tested love. Pehla aap khuda ne ishq kita, te aashik te mashook Nabi Rasool Miya, and the Prophet was the beloved. And then Khusro is talking about in his Khamsa, how he talks about Pai Sagbo Sida Majnu Khalq Pur Sidin Chebud. So this and the story about the dog also being repeated about Khwaja Nizamuddin, who says that this dog looks like a dog who I have seen in the streets of my beloved Guru, so I am kissing the feet of this dog. So there's this whole a complete surrender to love, and love as a shared space, and love as a sure way of reaching the divine, and it incorporates all the other things too. So I think that is something which is very unique in this tradition, and which then later on what we have called Ganga Jamuni Tehzeeb, of course, or so I think that this is something that really needs to be kept alive in public memory, because I think we keep forgetting, and then we start the fight all over again about who has a sole claim to the truth. And I don't know. So I think Hazrat Amir Khusro very successfully answers that question for us.
Mm.
So it is really amazing, of course, that he could say and embody so many of these things back then. I think embodying these ideas has become probably more dangerous now than maybe those times. I don't know,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
remarkable,
But
truly.
but it sort of reminds me that it's not these ideas that he's talking about is actually part of a vocabulary and a way of thinking that is very much um, embodied in many other South Asian traditions, right? It's not unique. So, I'm thinking about in some of the Upanishads, you have this phrase, Tattvam Asi, that you are the other, that, the otherness, you and the other, you have to realize that you are the other, this idea of non-duality or I think of, um, just because I was reading it the other day, the Gujarati Bhakti poet Narsi Mehta, said, whose bhajan became Mahatma Gandhi's favorite, Vaishnava Jan Tene Kahiye, that the true Vaishnava is one who does not inflict pain on others, and that, so this kind of a spirit on how you deal with others and how you deal with those that are different has a long, long discourse in South Asian poetics. And it becomes through the poetry and through the song, it becomes part of people's worldview. As you pointed out, sometimes I think these, what I call the loud discourses, the loud political discourses that are amplified in, media spaces and social spaces and political spaces, are in a certain way are trying to drown out those voices, that you find in the poetry, in the music, in the art. And I think, as you rightly said, we have to make sure that, people remember that this is actually these traditions, and these traditions go back centuries, you know, um, you know, at least, 10 centuries, and when you think about the modern political discourses are 80 years old, maybe 90 years old, hardly anything. It's just a blip of time. And so when you think about, what the discourses have been, at least at a poetic level and artistic level, we have to keep this in mind. I would also say that what is interesting about Amir Khusro is um, his love for everything Indian. In this, he has in his work, Lucifer, the nine spheres. He recounts the many things in which India excels. The religion, the philosophy, the logic, Sanskrit language and grammar, music, mathematics, and believe it or not, the mango. Amir Khusro loved mangoes. He just talks about mangoes. Uh,
And
um, you
Pan,
know,
and also Pan, my
and
favorite thing.
pan, yes, yes. So mangoes and pan. So how much more Indian can you get, right? But he uses in his Hindi poetry, he uses all these symbols and tropes and metaphors from this local Indian tradition to express his thoughts, on many aspects of life, including the subject of this love. So he following the literary conventions that you find popular in India, he uses the notion of biraha or viraha, um, the yearning, longing, love experienced by the virahini or the woman who is separated from her beloved husband, to express, this longing that's felt by the human soul for God. And this motif has, of course, been popularized by the Radha Krishna imagery in Bhakti poetry, where it represents the soul who is longing for suhag or union with the elusive beloved. And she's longing for the moment where she will meet her beloved, and even a loving glance will transform her, will transform. And Amir Khusro has used this symbolism of viraha and virahini in so many different contexts. And he definitely uses the symbolism even to depict his relationship with Nizamuddin Aulia. But the fact that he uses this symbolism means again that his poetry can be understood by a multicultural audience because people are so familiar with this motif of viraha from different contexts that immediately, just as we were talking about Namidanam, the Persian verse, brings Amir Khusro's poetry in conversation with other poets. You mentioned other Persian writers. The use of viraha and virahini brings him into conversation with a whole range of Indian poets across across the centuries. So again, it's very interesting how Amir Khusro's poetry, so many years, so many centuries later, the conversation continues. So I like to look at these poetic traditions. I usually call them TBC, to be continued. And they're always, and it continues through the centuries in different contexts, in different situations. And that again um, is the beauty of the Qawwali, which enables these conversations to continue and address contemporary needs. People say, why are you looking at these traditions that are centuries old? But the message that they have is even more important today in a highly polarized and fragmented world. And so they're living traditions, and these Qawwalis are living traditions of hope and strength. At times when people feel afraid, fear, it's giving you consolation. So I think that this is again this one of the strengths of these traditions. So Bilal Saba, over to you.
Indeed, absolutely. I think Hazrat Amir Khusro, I think his love for India and that of his Piro Murshid as well, somehow he found a way to, there's this Hindavi couplet, for instance, which is very powerful and would be problematized at several levels by, say, the women's movement today, where he says that प्रीत करे तो ऐसी कर जैसी हिंदू जोए पूत पराए कारने जरी जरी कोयला होए. But in Farsi, he's writing Roze ke riza shavad ustkhane man bashad hunuz dar dile visham hawaye to. So he sees that dust to dust, ashes to ashes, but even after one is gone, somehow, even if you turn into atoms, somehow you are still circumambulating the beloved. And then, because those traditions are still alive today, um, we see people, there's this very interesting couplet which says that Matti naho barbad pase marg ilahi jab khak ude meri to madine ki hawa ho. Or that when I'm dust. Now this is such an interesting concept that that may I circumambulate the house of the beloved, right? So I think these concepts, they are timeless. Hazrat Amir Khusro's love and deep understanding and absolute oneness with, whether it's Vaishnava Bhakti or whether it's mystical devotion coming from Tasawwuf, how he beautifully finds a way to Zihal Miskeen Makun Taghaful Anduraye Naina Banaye Batiyan, and people are still writing in that vein. Jano iman o dil tum pe vari nijam jeet li tumne bazi mein hari nijam. People are still writing, so it's a living tradition. People are still writing in those ways. They want to address the Piri Muridi and the love between the Pir and Murshid through both the Hindu as well as the Islamic idioms, which is so interesting. So they are exploring all these concepts of avatar and guru and murid and pir, and somehow the later on we will talk about the Kalandari tradition, the antinomian traditions, and how it's even more strongly shown, depicted in those. So definitely Hazrat Amir Khusro's ideas give rise to, and those of his predecessors also gave rise to a very shared and pluralistic culture and outlook. This kalam, Professor Saab, I'm going to sing a little snatch of it, and then maybe you can throw some light on it for us also, maybe with regard to how the language has actually been, two languages have been merged. So. से हाले मिसकीन मकुन तगाफुल दोराए नैना बनाए बतियां से हाल मिसकीन मकुन तगाफुल दोराए नैना बनाए बतियां से हाल मिसकीन मकुन तगाफुल दोराए नैना बनाए बतियां किताब हिजरान नदार में जा किताब हिजरान नदार में जा नली हो काहे लगाए छतियां से हाले मिसकीन मकुन तगाफुल शबाने हिजरां दराज चूं जुल्फ रोज़े वसीलत चुम्र कोता सखी पिया को जो मैं न देखूं सखी पिया को जो मैं न देखूं तो कैसे काटूं अंधेरी रतियां से हाल मिस्कीन मकुन तगाफुल से हाल मिस्कीन दोराए नैना बनाए बतियां.
Okay. Yeah. Again, marvelous job. I mean, mashallah. I mean, you just, just the way you bring these different verses together. Um, Unfortunately, I have to leave very shortly in a couple of minutes because I had another call coming up. But I did want to say this bilingual, where he's talking about one verse in Persian, the other verse in Hindi, trying to negotiate between different cultures. But the theme, of their, both in the Persian and the Hindi is talking about the separation and the longing and the yearning. And I think this line that he said, that life is too short, and the quest, and the curls of the beloved are too long, and the quest for the beloved. So even a lifetime is not going to be enough, right? What he's talking about, this quest, this longing, this yearning, is so central to this quest. Again, I wish I had some more time, but unfortunately, I have to because I have this other call coming up at 2:30, so I have to
Dr. Asani, thank you so much. Thank you very much for joining us today. We really appreciate it. It was wonderful. It was beautiful rapport between the two of you, and I learned a lot. I'm sure all of us did.
Yes, and I learned a lot too. I mean, it's just that's the joy of these kinds of sessions where we are learning from each other, and But I think I would say that um, one thing that again sort of stands out for me, when I think about Amir Khusro and his relevance to contemporary times, is that you know we are so quick to make judgments of other people based on difference, and that judgmental, view where we take difference and we are so judgmental about it, and sometimes we carry our biases and so on. And what Amir Khusro's message is that that these people that you're making judgments about based on categories and so on and so forth. Remember that you are from one soul.
Right.
This that you've all been created from one soul, and that to knowing one another. It's going back to this Quranic idea that knowing what one another is the reason why God created difference.
True.
We created, into nations and communities. And in a certain way, I see, Khusro, is trying to realize that vision, like how do you get to know the other in so many different ways. And I think his poetry is such a powerful way in which he's engaging with difference. And
Beautiful.
yeah,
Beautiful,
thank
marvelous, marvelous. We only wish you were here with us a while longer. But as you said, that life is short, and
yes.
the the जो मिलन की रात है वो जुल्फों की तरह तवील अरसा बाद आएगी. So hopefully
Yeah,
that
yeah,
tawil arsa will become shortened, and you will grace us soon with
yeah.
your presence and with your wisdom and your knowledge and your blessings. I see that many people have questions for you, so maybe we'll find a way to
Yeah, you can
have
forward them to me.
Shad.
You know,
Inshallah.
yeah,
Yes,
forward it to me, and then I can respond to them, or maybe I can come in on one session and respond to some of the questions.
that would be amazing. That would be amazing.
Okay. All right.
Thank you so much, Dr.
Wonderful meeting everybody, and we'll be, uh, uh, as they say, Pir Milenge. We will meet, inshallah, once again. All right.
Thank you.
Okay. Bye. Salam, everybody. Yeah.
Thank you all for joining us. We'll meet again next Sunday. I think that was a beautiful ending to our meeting. What do you say, Bilal?
Absolutely. I know there are many questions, and we will take some of these up. Please, if there's possible, to take a screenshot or save these
Yeah.
questions somehow. I see there are many, many very important questions here. So I will try and address some of them too in the next session. And Harsha Bhai, very, very good question, very pertinent question. बट वक्त कम है, वक्त मुख्तसर है, बातें बहुत सारी हैं, ज़िंदगी बहुत छोटी है और हसरतें बहुत सारी हैं. So hopefully we will be able to meet once again in just 1 week. And before this next meeting, of course, a list of things which you may view or hear would definitely be sent to you. And we have a little change that Sheikh Isa from Turkey has agreed to do a session comparing the Mevlevi Sama and the Chishti Sama. So the music of the followers of Maulana Rumi and the followers of Khwaja Muinuddin Chishti, and because these are the two traditions with the strongest Sama, so it would also be something we are incorporating into these sessions. And so that's something which we are very happy that we were able to do. It would provide a more comprehensive insight. And of course, I wanted to sing Chhap Tilak Sab Cheen for you, but that we will do at the beginning of the next session. And we will also talk about this whole becoming fana, becoming dyed in the colors of the beloved so much that even your identity, your khudi, your ana becomes completely dismantled and just blown away. And so until next time, with more music, more conversation, and hopefully answers to your questions. So we will take your ijazat. We'll bid you a safe week and a blessed week. And thank you once again, Aisha ji, Bujib Saab, Sidi Asif, and everybody, all of you, all my friends, my near and dear ones, and those I have met for the first time. Thank you so much once again.
Thank you all.